Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Joint School Committee meeting for May 18th, 2020. It's 5:02. We're going to start the meeting this evening. Once again, just a reminder, this is a meeting of the Dover and Sherborn school committees and our joint school committee, and the region rather. And we are doing this via Zoom as issued by Governor Baker, his guidance regarding the open meeting law. It is a public meeting that may be held remotely, and individuals wishing to participate have the link where they can join. And if they are on this evening, we also have the same format as we would if we were in a community room together. We are going to start it with a community comments. And with regards to the community comments, you have the opportunity to express any comments. Once again, this is not a dialogue back and forth. Once you've expressed your comments and everyone who wishes to, we will then shut that part of the meeting off and we will conduct the rest of the meeting's business. And at that time, if there is comments back and forth, it's through the school committee. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. So with regards to that issue, if there is anyone on who wants to express a community comment, if you can please either raise your hand in the screen, or if you want to click on the side to participants as a hand raise, and we will acknowledge it. Okay, Don, I saw none, and if you didn't as well, we'll then proceed to the first item on the agenda, which is the superintendent's report. So with that, I will hand this over to Dr. Keough.
Okay, thank you, Angie. Well, obviously, you all have my report. Really, the big piece of that is the information related to the task force that I would like to begin on reopening the schools. The big challenge, obviously, is the constantly changing dynamic. For all we know, we could learn in a month from now that the schools aren't going to open, or we could learn that everyone can go back and everything's going to be fine. So we do need this task force because there are so many things to talk about. But how that thing ultimately, how it ultimately operates sort of remains to be seen. I listed out for you what I think are the key areas that we need to focus on as a school system. And they may be different, right, at each level. So this really does apply to the joint school committees. But our facilities, for example, what are we going to do with our facilities when we ultimately return to the schools? How are the classrooms going to be set up? Are there any kinds of changes that we need to make to our facilities in order to allow people into the building? Do we have to check people temperatures? Do we need hand washing stations on the entrance to each building? Do we send everyone in through the front entrance? Or do they come through different entrances? Do we stagger our start times in order to get people into the facilities in a smoother, more distanced fashion? All of those things need to be taken into consideration. So I think that would be one area of study of this task force. By the way, I'm viewing this task force similar to the Start Times task force, which really had a steering committee that was made up of all the subcommittee leaders and other people who were on those subcommittees. So I would love to keep it as small as possible, but we can talk about that in just a minute. So facilities, obviously, health and hygiene, how can we ensure that our staff and students are safe in the schools? And that is going to be a big issue because if people don't feel safe, they won't come. And so we really need to be on top of that, and we need to think through what that's going to look like. What will we do if somebody is found to be sick in our school? How will we manage that situation? What about those who are immunocompromised? How will we serve their needs? Can we take care of their educational needs? Or if it's a teacher, can they teach remotely? I mean, these things have to be, they need to be worked out. Feeding the students, bathroom, locker room use, water fountains, facial coverings. That's really just, I think, scratching the surface of health and hygiene. Instruction, the instruction for for our students, what will that look like? Are we going to do some kind of hybrid model? Are we just going to, we don't know yet, obviously. We don't have to make these decisions today, thank goodness. And we expect that, you know, others will coalesce around some of these ideas and that the state will give us some guidance in this regard. But there are things that have to be worked out. I do think that in terms of our remote learning, I don't think it's something that will be gone for good come, you know, the end of June. I think that remote learning is something that we will probably be incorporating into schools for many years to come. And as such, you know, we want to look at what we've learned and what's worked for us and what hasn't, because we have really learned some great things, and there are things that I don't think we're going to want to turn back on. So the instruction obviously will be a big part of it. We want to know what we want to assess where our kids are when they come back. Have they lost ground? Is there any way to determine that? Transportation, you know, getting the kids to and from school in the traditional format, the traditional routes. It all has to be looked at. Cleaning the buses, how often does that happen? How many kids can we fit on a bus? You know, do we have to stagger runs? The scheduling, do we run a regular schedule? Do we run some kind of hybrid model where, you know, on off, perhaps, you know, kids come in one day and not the next? Do we do a different kind of hybrid where kids come in for, you know, 3 weeks and the other half don't? Because one of the real challenges that we know that we have to consider, no matter what, whether we're in or whether we're kind of in, is the social distancing. And that means, from everything I've been reading, you're not going to be able to fit the same number of kids in a typical classroom. But that needs to really literally be measured out. My guess is that we'll fit like 10 to 12 student desks in a classroom, but are those, you know, how thoroughly do we clean those desks? In some countries, they're saying that's that child's desk and no one else ever sits in that child's desk. Those kinds of things have to be completely fleshed out. The other thing that we'd have to consider is, you know, are there other spaces in our buildings that we would make use of in order to spread kids out? And along these lines, you know, how much will staff be able to manage? Will teachers be able to, for example, teach their regular classes but also have remote stuff going at the same time? Or will it be the teacher teaches, the kid is off working on their homework, and then they come back the next day, you know, and start over? And so if that's the case, then we may lose like half of the kind of ground we would cover in a typical year. So again, lots to think about there. Before and after school programming, athletics, that I definitely expect to get guidance on. But what if proposals come forward for some form of different kind of athletic program where it's not as frequent, or it's not the same Tri-Valley League, but maybe 3 towns? And, you know, how often do we have to clean the turf field or the locker rooms or the equipment? What about Sheeta Dita? We have before and after school care. One of the main reasons schools really need to go back to operation is, frankly, for the economy. Families cannot stay home with their kids forever. So this is a big issue. Communications is, as always, just as it was with start times, it's going to be really important to let people know what's happening. We have to constantly tell our families what our plan is. I hope you had a chance to look at the International School of Copenhagen and their webpage, where they really give you good guidance as a parent as to what they're doing. And that's sort of my hope for Dover-Sherborn. I don't see why we can't do something like that. But you know, as I'm sure you're listening, I'm feeling the same kind of angst. My hands literally sweat when I talk about this stuff because I am so nervous about how many different pieces we need to look at. And I'm not going to sit back and say, well, not a problem. We'll just wait for the state to tell us what they think we should do. That's not going to work. So I'm proposing that we have this task force. I have suggested that that we have a representative from each school committee serve on the steering committee and thus on task forces, some of these, subcommittees. But it is true that traditionally we've had 2 members from the region and 1 from Dover and 1 from Sherborn. That was so that the region could have a Sherborn and a Dover representative. I'm fine with that possibility. I will say that my goal, one of the things that we learned in the start time task force, especially as we went to phase 2, is that the more streamlined it can be, I think, in my opinion, the more efficient it can be because there's so much information to get through. So, you know, I know people are curious as to how much of a commitment it will be. Well, if there's 30 people in the room, it'll be more of a commitment because that many people will want to weigh in. So we have a leadership team made up of probably 16 people. If you throw in 3 school committee members, you're up to 19. If you throw in 4, you're up to 20. Within our subcommittees, I am anticipating the need for involvement of other stakeholders within the system. For example, most of you, well, all of you are parents within the system, so you can kind of cover sort of some of that in the process, but we will need staff members, certainly, in some of these conversations, and more than likely union representatives. I'm glad Laura's here listening to this, because when we start talking about staff safety, you know, we want to hear what's important to them. So, so that's sort of where we're at. The commitment, I just can't say exactly what it will be. When we were working as a start time committee, we were meeting every other week. And originally we met, perhaps Michael, you might be able to refresh my memory. We might have met weekly when we first started, and then we went to every other week once the subcommittees started. Does that sound right to you? And so, yeah. So I'm anticipating something like that. Again, the bigger challenge, and you know, those of us who come into administration like these kinds of challenges, it's like a puzzle. It's not fun necessarily, but it's a puzzle. It's like, okay, now the rules have changed. Now what are we going to do? Uh-oh, this just came at us. Now what are we going to do? So if you like that kind of troubleshooting and kind of digging around for information about what other people are doing, this is a great committee for you. I know that you all know this, but it's worth reiterating. Michael was probably the key person on the Start Times Task Force because of his willingness to do all the research. There was a ton of research that went on into that to find out how other places had gone about doing this, why they had done it, what did the medical research show, and there's a big piece of this in all of that, or a big piece of that in all of this, but we also know that our building leaders have to work through this as well because they know what works best in their systems. So what I was hoping to do is have you guys work it out yourselves and basically let me know, probably through your chairs, who those people would be. Then what we do is we have Cheryl set up doodles as to when these meetings will work best. We have on occasion had people who kind of alternated. That can work, although it's not ideal. I do expect this to go through the summer. I just do. And I think people will take vacations, obviously, they have to. But I think that we will, when that happens, we'll have, you know, people filling in or reporting in for those who can't be there. Or some of us will probably, like myself, might just Zoom in. So So before I continue, maybe I should just see if there are any questions about this before I finish out my report. Angie.
Dr. Keogh, one question that some of my committee members had is with regards to the commitment. So you'll want to be in person, and then, like you said, some people could Zoom in. Is that how it's going to work with regards to meetings?
We may, in fact, we may just Zoom right through the summer. It's not, in the past, for the Start Times task force met in the principal's conference room in the middle school, which is an ideal spot because it has the technology set up, it's comfortable. That's not going to work with this size group, definitely not. So we, unless we find something better, we will probably Zoom these. I don't know what you think about that, Beth or Don. I actually haven't thought about that, Angie. But I do think.
I think with the summer, that was just a question that some people had because they may be gone but would like to participate. So
I see. Well, what I would say to that is that those who are gone but still willing to participate, because there are those who are gone and they're not interested in participating in anything. And then there are those who are gone who are still willing to participate from afar if that's suitable. And I guess that's what you're asking, and that is suitable. If people want to Zoom in, that's still going to be a possibility. But they will still also, if they're on subcommittees, will need to find ways to communicate regularly within their subcommittees. And then what we do is the subcommittees go out and do their work and then come back to the full task force so that we can kind of check the boxes on the things that we've hit or not hit. Amanda?
I just had a question. I know that there's sort of the state level, and maybe there'll be guidance, but I agree that we can't sort of wait around for that. Is there a group of just local superintendents working together? Because it seems to me there's lots of pieces that need to fall in place in greater circles, because for teachers to be at work, their children need to be at school, etc. So is there any effort to join with other local superintendents as you do this work?
Yes, so great question. So we are always in communication. I guess the cat's out of the bag that this is essentially how we manage snow days as well. We have conversations. So we're constantly in communication as to what we're thinking, but just to kind of highlight an example of, well, I don't really want to go there. I can just tell you that the challenge with that, Angie, is that everybody's system is a little different. Everybody's financial circumstances are a little different. Everybody's governance structure is a little different. Everybody's level of school and committee involvement is a little different. Every superintendent has different needs in terms of their involvement of what's going on in their buildings. And so it's what happens is we're not always on the same page. And I do know that there's a tri-county roundtable, which is 23 different superintendents meet on a regular basis, and we will clearly continue to throughout the summer. But often what happens when we get together is like, well, geez, it would be nice if we knew what the state was going to do in this regard. It would be nice if we knew what was going to happen in this regard. And so we hit these dead ends. And that's what makes this particular committee so much more challenging, is that it's those uncertainties and having to be nimble and turn on a dime. We might be thinking, well, we can do some kind of, we want to bring everyone back. And we're thinking that's going to happen based on what the governor says. And then you get a spike in the numbers and he backs off and says, now you need to think about a hybrid. Or, we'll go right back to remote. Or we go back to remote for a few weeks and then to a hybrid and then to the full. I think that has been very taxing on superintendents, and I think what we're starting to see across the state is people starting to say, well, I'm just going to work this out myself, which is not necessarily a good thing, because then families start comparing us to our neighboring districts who might be doing something different. So it's a good question, because how do we reconcile with what our neighbors are doing? So maybe that's the communication group's charge. And is that we are constantly staying in touch with other school systems to see what they're doing, especially our surrounding school systems, or those who we consider ourselves alike. I hope that answered that. Anyone else?
Anne, go ahead.
Anne, sorry.
Thanks, no worries. Two really quick things. One is, I thought your list of potential focus areas was really thorough. Just wondering, will there be a separate group that captures what we've learned and assesses what's worked, what hasn't, sort of across, not just academically, but across everything?
So that's a great question. And actually, Kate McCarthy mentioned to me, and let's not forget all of the special education components, which I feel fall under the instruction piece. And same thing with the assessments of what's worked and what hasn't. And in saying this, sharing this with Beth, she was a little bowled over because clearly she oversees instruction as the curriculum and instruction assistant superintendent, but she, I think, knows, and so do I, that group will have various areas of focus. So some might focus on what does the instruction look like when it's remote, or is there a blended classroom model? What about our special needs population? What about our special needs population that can't come in? And so much more. Beth, do you want to add to that? Because I've gotten the full conversation, but there were other pieces that you mentioned.
Sure. You and I talked about this, and Laura McGovern and I have been talking about this too. So Laura, feel free to jump in. But what we're trying to do is find ways to capture definitely qualitative data right now from teachers and from students and from parents as to what's working before they leave for the summer, because they're living it and they know what's working and what's not. So we're looking at some surveys, we're looking at some focus groups, and that will continue. We've also talked as a leadership team about the quantitative data, which again, I think there's too many variables to put all of our eggs in one basket. Even if we look at recent trends of cohorts in years past as to what reading level they left on and what reading level they return on. So that piece we're still working through, but I definitely think trying to figure out what works and what doesn't with what we currently have is the main goal. And then going back to the question of working with other superintendents, Andrew meets with his group regularly, and Dawn meets with her group of job alikes regularly. I work with mine, and we're already planning some professional development over the summer around blended learning and hybrid learning. So all the local assistant superintendents are kind of putting our heads together as to what our teachers need and how can we accomplish that based on what we've learned.
Can you talk about the flipped classroom as well, Beth? Because I think that's a big part of this potentially.
Sure. So there's lots of different names floating around there. The flipped classroom model has been around for a little while. And for those of you who've had Tony Milborn, or your children have had Tony Milborn, you've experienced it. Basically, her students will obtain their content at home at night, either on, through a video or through reading. And then their time in class is all about practicing together, her being able to move around the room and check in with small groups of students or individual students. So instead of the teacher leading the conversation for 45 minutes, she has an opportunity to interact with all the kids. That is what we're seeing kind of works through this remote learning process, is that the students asynchronously get the content and the material, practice a little bit, and then come to the Zoom sessions to have conversations, question and answer sessions, Socratic seminars, those sorts of things. So it looks like we're trending in that direction. And if per se we do this hybrid model, which is, sometime in school, sometime out of school, whether that is, students come in on every other day, and then that slices the population in half, or we have some students who stay home entirely. The hybrid model will allow us to do somewhat of the flipped classroom and remote learning model, which is the kids learning independently, practicing independently, but their time together, whether it's in school or online, will be about practicing and teachers assessing and providing support.
Thank you. So does that answer your question, Ann? Thanks.
Maggie has a question.
Maggie.
Thanks, and thank you, Dr. Keogh and Ms. McCoy, for that explanation. I think that it's clear that like these conversations are already going and strong in terms of the work that you guys are doing internally. I think to the point that you made before, Dr. Keogh, about the frustrations of getting in the larger group of superintendents and where that can kind of go like kind of down to like frustration level. I think that that is the one area that I would like the task force and building and district leadership to be looking at the other districts in terms of what has been most effective, not just within Dover-Sherborn, but also in our region, in our state, or wherever, because I feel like this point in the spring, we really are at a lab classroom stage, like all over the country. And in any lab, you know, there's things that go well and things that are kind of a dud, but we've collected a lot of data. And if we could get those like points of light and share those in our teaching community, that will really hopefully give you guys a good strong base on what's actually possible to do here. Thank you for all this work. It's a ton of work. It's going to be a long summer, but hopefully, regardless of where we are in coronavirus land, it will actually like have a good impact on students and teaching in the future, no matter what.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I love that idea of kind of looking at what's working. This is what prompted me to actually look at the International School of Copenhagen, was that we were on a conference call with superintendents, two superintendents from Germany, one from Denmark and one from South Korea. And they're obviously in reopening phases there. And it's amazing what we can learn from them about what's worked and what hasn't. So, and there's certainly a lot more out there to look at in this regard. I think what's interesting is how well this dovetails with the work that Beth and the Innovation Committee and the Portrait of a Graduate Committee, their work really centers around this kind of, at least it aligns nicely with the places that I've heard from who have had success with this model of teaching. So I do think that we're going to find that the time and energy that Beth and her team and all the folks who were involved in all of that, that it was well spent and that it's not going away, that we're going to continue to have conversations about how our teaching and learning morphs in this process and to the benefit of our students. So I like that idea, though, of continuing to look at what's out there. And Nancy?
Sorry, you might have a boys wrestling in another part of the house that they might come this way, so I apologize. Are we going to survey at all? Have we thought about surveying or doing any focus groups with students?
Yes.
To
so
see what, I think that, you know, from a bunch of different age levels to see what's working, what's not, you know, from the students that are relatively good students anyway to the students that, you know, are average or below average, just to get a handle on what their likes are, what works for them. And I know it's, you know, there's a big landscape, but I just think that would be helpful to you know, get their feedback.
I agree. And actually, Nancy, the communications committee of the task force for start times was really the one, I think, I don't know if I'm right about this, Michael, you might remember, I think that started with our communications group because we needed that data to see what was important. And maybe we just did it before we even had the subcommittees, but yes, Nancy, it needs to drive our thinking. And you'll recall that when we did the start times surveys, we did in fact survey middle school, high school students, parents, teachers. We kind of have to do all of the above. And I think in this case, finding out what's worked is important. But like we have data now from teachers and parents. I don't think we surveyed the students, although we have asked them, but I don't think did we formally survey the students, Beth, about what was working?
We did the middle and high school early on, but that's the goal, is to go back and do it again. I know Scott Kellett is already formulating focus groups at each grade level, so he's already kind of jumped right into it. So
Right.
that's a great idea to do them at the elementary and high school as well.
And this leads to, one of my later bullets about the parent Zooms and the student Zooms and the faculty Zooms. It may be anecdotal, but it's actually really helpful to us. Somehow you never forget when you're on a Zoom with 25 people or 100 people and they're peppering you with questions, you actually don't forget what was hot on their minds. And so it does influence our thinking. So we do want to hear from the kids, and we are arranging to do that. The Zooms with kids are tricky. I mean, you can imagine if you were a 13-year-old kid and you got an invite from the superintendent to talk about the remote learning, how quickly you would run to your computer to log in. I'm concerned that we might not have that much interest. And then at the elementary level, how much can we gather about what's worked for them and what hasn't really, that we know worked for them or didn't. It's a little trickier, but yes, surveys are a big part of this and will continue to be a big part of this. Michael, and then Leslie.
Couple of comments, maybe / suggestions. One, to your last point of the perhaps surveying or informational sessions with younger kids, perhaps having high school students, maybe even middle school students involved in some subcommittees over the summer, who could even, they can potentially host some of those calls and really collect feedback where it might not be as effectively delivered if there were an adult who was hosting that. Second point, it may be too aspirational, but to the extent that this initiative can be looked at as a really exciting opportunity to jumpstart some of the initiatives that Beth has been working hard with a very broad-based team. It can be an exciting time, I think, to try out some new things or put some new things in place permanently. And so to the extent even the task force could be branded in some way to have that positive energy to doing things a little bit differently and learning from what was done during this remote period. The third ask, I guess, would be to include and think about, and I don't know whether this would be under the instructional piece, but some formalized SEL. I think that whether it's remote or in-person learning, that it's also a good opportunity to be able to redouble the focus on social emotional issues and attention and education, which may be an even greater need coming back.
Excellent points, Michael. Thank you. Were you done? Yes. Okay, sorry. Leslie? Leslie, did you want to add something? There you go.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Okay, so I wanted to mention a few things. I've heard a lot of complaints about the lack of communication and feedback that the parents are getting from the teachers. I personally think, we're doing our best, but I wanted to point out that I was speaking to a mother the other day who's very frustrated with it. So then when the mom walked away, I asked the child if she misses that feedback or that communication with the teacher, and she didn't. So I do feel that oftentimes the parents feel our children might need something that our children don't necessarily need. I'm not saying they don't need feedback, but I think think it's very important to give our children a voice in this. And I also thought maybe getting the teachers involved, great. And he has writing workshop. And I was thinking even near the end of the school year, she could suggest that, the teachers suggest you write 3 things that you like about remote learning or 3 things that you thought could be improved by remote learning. I do think it's very important to listen to our children as well.
Excellent. Leslie, were you done? I don't want to cut you
Yes.
off.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I completely agree. And, I know it sounds trite. It even sounds trite to me when I say it, but we are in a pandemic. This is a really unusual thing that we're going through here. And it's impacting people in all sorts of different ways. The typical, if you think about like a triple E last year, where we had some families who were really elevated anxiety around triple E, and most kind of rolled with it. Well, this isn't triple E. This is like triple E on steroids. And families are at their wits' end, and they have a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen to their kids down the road. How is this going to impact their kids' lives in their future? And so that anxiety is really, really heightened. And what I'm saying to the leadership team is we can't be dismissive of the recommendations that people bring to us, even if they come out of left field. We can't be dismissive of what they're saying. We have to hear what they're saying, because usually there's an element of truth in it, and sometimes a lot of truth in it. So we have to be responsive to those kinds of parents' concerns. But you're right. There will be times that people are overreacting or speculating based on what they're hearing. If I had a nickel for every time somebody said that other schools were doing this, that, and the other thing, I'd be a very wealthy person, because I guess that's our natural competitive nature in our 2 communities. But people remind me all the time about what they're doing at X school or Y school. And to that end, I actually, Beth did some serious research on that, on what the private schools are doing, and found that, in fact, we were doing quite well. And I believe we are. But that's not to try and convince people, because as they say, you can't argue with somebody's emotions, and people are very emotional right now. They're extremely emotional. So, we're trying to be the calming force in the storm. And I had this discussion with the chairs. We all have to be the calming force in the storm, because we are in the midst of a storm. And I don't think the storm's going to calm down come September. I think we're going to be in it for a while. And this is when trust matters, that when people share with us their concerns, hopefully they trust that we've listened to them and we're going to look into it. So when I see emails from the principals to their staff, for example, about the number of times they should be doing their Zoom sessions or their check-ins, and that it's been agreed upon, and that the system was going to go that way, and we get reports from families that it's not happening to the degree that it's supposed to, and then I read an email from a principal to his or her staff saying, "Don't forget, okay, this question has come up. Are the students supposed to be on this many Zoom sessions?" And the answer is yes. That makes me feel better, because I want to be sure that when the parents ask us these things or raise these things to us, that feedback makes its way back to the teachers. And if there are specific, folks that for whatever reason it's been a problem for, that we're addressing it. And through that trust building, hopefully people will stay with us as we go into this next year and hang in there with us. But it's not easy. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is not ideal. This is not a great way to teach. When you are a teacher, Mark, you know this, any of the other folks, Maggie, any of the other folks on this Zoom right now who teach, know that this is absolutely not ideal. Teachers like to move around their room, to touch base with kids, stand right next to them, put your hand on their shoulder. there's so much interaction that goes on, and Zoom is a really hard way to do it, but it's our reality, and we're going to have to find ways to make it work. And we will. We definitely will. But these are great suggestions. I don't know if there's anything else anybody wanted to add and if so, I suppose since just in paying attention to the time, maybe just shoot me an email or to the chair and they'll get it back to me. But this is a fluid situation, right? So this is not etched in stone. We will adapt this committee as necessary in our work. I wanted to mention very quickly that I mentioned the Zoom meetings, but I did also want to mention that the end of the year planning is a priority. We've moved some of these meetings up to finalize our positions as a system in terms of closing out the school year and allowing people to get their belongings and for us to get our belongings from the people. We have a lot of technology out there and textbooks. We want those things back, obviously, and we've got to develop systems for doing that. We're working with Jill Fedor, who's our liaison to our 2 boards of health, so that we're thoughtful about how we get things back to the children and families and vice versa. So that is one of the things that we're meeting on actually tomorrow morning. We're also finalizing our decisions on the end of the year ceremonies so that the middle school and high school parents and students will know exactly what we're doing, and they'll know in the next probably 48 hours. So those things are getting nailed down. Again, that, today we were supposed to get more guidance, right, from the governor, and we did. About manufacturing, about houses of worship, but we didn't get any guidance about graduations or, large school events. So this is sort of the nature of it. And I'm not pointing the finger at the government because I think that's just the way it goes, but that's part of the challenge. And we've tried to be thoughtful. We've tried to hang in there until the bitter end to make sure that we did not leave any opportunities for kids and families to get back together if they were going to be allowable. It's not looking so promising at this point. So I just wanted to make sure that I brought you guys up to speed on that. I don't know if you had any other questions from that report, but I think that's about it.
Andrew, sorry, don't forget our 5th graders and their transition in that discussion. Yes, that's a big one, and I feel for all of them. So I'm curious to see what comes out of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right, Brooke, thank you.
There's actually a group, if I can just chime in, there's a group of parents and a group of folks from Pine Hill meeting virtually tomorrow morning to talk about the 5th graders. So they're being thought about too.
So if that's all for the superintendent's report, Dr. Keough, we're going to move on to our next agenda item. And for this, I'm going to turn it over to the Region School Chair, Ann Hovey, with regards to the superintendent's evaluation.
Thanks, Angie. So a yearly evaluation of the district superintendent is one of the school committee's most important jobs. The format we used was updated by the Mass Department of Secondary and Elementary Education, DESE, in 2019. Because of the upheaval to the normal evaluation process caused by COVID-19, and our decision that all of our time and effort would be better spent addressing the immediate needs of the students and staff and the complete restructuring of how schools operate during the pandemic, we opted to perform an abbreviated version of the evaluation that focused on overall performance. In addition, because the progress toward completing district goals, the usual backbone of a superintendent evaluation, has taken a backseat to addressing the 3 phases of education since our closure in mid-March, these evaluations reflect a hybrid of the formal process and an informal process. We still believe there is value in this process, and taking a moment to reflect on what has worked well and where further improvement is needed helps the district better serve its students, staff, and community. The last 3 steps of this process are for me to read aloud what the evaluations were, then for you to read aloud anything you would like to formally have included in the evaluation, and then finally for the committees to vote to adopt the end of year summative evaluation, which will then be submitted to DESE. For explanation, to arrive at the summative evaluation, the chairs assigned a numeric value to each rating category, 0 to 4 where there were 5 categories and 0 to 3 where there were 4, and found an average rating for each goal and standard. With 16 members, the impact of individual ratings is decreased in most situations. It's just harder to move the needle. Therefore, it should be noted that while Dr. Keogh's overall rating for professional practice goals and district improvement goals is met, in both cases, the trend was toward exceeded, illustrating strong support for the superintendent's work in these areas. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read the end of cycle summative evaluation report, and then I'll read the statement that we will submit. Then I'll let you all read your pieces, and then we'll do that by committee, and then we'll vote. Everybody good? All right. So first, step 1 was assessing progress towards goal. Professional practice goals met. Student learning goals, significant progress. District improvement goals met. Step 2, performance on standards. Standard 1, instructional leadership, proficient. Standard 2, management and operations, proficient. Standard 3, family and community engagement, proficient. Standard 4, professional culture, proficient. And then finally, the overall summative performance is proficient. So thank you, Dr. Keogh, for all of your work that you've done this year. All right, so this is the formal statement. For fiscal year 2020, members of the Dover School Committee, Dover-Sherborn Regional School Committee, and the Sherborn School Committee completed individual end-of-cycle summative evaluation reports for Superintendent Dr. Andrew Keogh. Based on the ratings averaged from all 16 school committee members' individual evaluations, Dr. Keogh has achieved an overall rating of proficient in his third year superintendent of the public schools of Dover and Sherborn. On May 18, 2020, at an open meeting conducted remotely in a manner consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19, members from all 3 school committees were given the opportunity to read comments to be submitted as part of this evaluation process. These comments are captured in the official minutes of the meeting. So just really quickly, if you have something to read tonight, reminder to please email as accurate a copy as possible of that to me, and I'll forward it to Amy, so she doesn't have to type it all in as you're speaking. And after everyone has given their, you're welcome to pass, this is not required. And after people who've wanted to speak have done so, then we'll vote. Do you want us, should we just, since we're going, should we just start at the region and then we'll move on? All right, so Michael Jaffe, do you have something you would like to read into public comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Kate, do you?
No, thanks.
Okay. Maggie?
I do.
Okay.
Dr. Keogh, thank you for your service to our communities and your commitment to the students of Dover, Sherborn, and Boston. As we come to an end of a very unexpected school year, I'm grateful for your continued work leading the districts in a time of dizzying change, worry, and anxiety about the future of our schools. I know that you and your team have worked long hours to grow and adapt to the current world health crisis. I commend your formation of a task force to work this summer and take what we've experienced and use it to create a robust and sustainable plan for the fall, whatever might come our way from COVID-19. I deeply appreciate your continued collaboration with your colleagues in the central office. Building a dynamic and talented team there, including Ms. Vittori, Ms. McCoy, and Ms. McCarthy, has created a foundation of strength that will benefit our district for years to come. I'm grateful to your team at the high school, led by Mr. Smith and Ms. Deaver Keegan, for the work that was done at the high school this year, including thoughtfully reevaluating and creating a dynamic new schedule in response to next year's later school start time. I hope that as we move forward into these uncharted waters, you might continue your work to build consensus and buy-in from community members and parents, as well as from your talented and hardworking faculty around future change and growth, both that related to coronavirus and also the ongoing work that we're doing to continue to provide our towns with the schools that they expect and that our children deserve. Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie. Lynn, do you have something you'd like to read?
No, thanks.
All right, Judy.
I will pass.
Okay. And I'm good. All right, thanks. Angie?
I'll start at the top. Amanda, do you have something you'd like to state in the record? Okay, go ahead.
I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Keogh for his solid leadership in a topsy-turvy world and for keeping the social emotional health of our students at the heart of his work. In particular, I am grateful for his continued thoughtful leadership around implementation of revised start times, even in the face of opposition. I also thank him for his collaboration with school leaders around ensuring continuity of learning and relationships during this challenging time at home. We are lucky to have a leader so committed to doing right by our children and families.
Thank you, Amanda. Mike Fitzgerald, do you have anything you want to read?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Keogh has continued to improve the Dover-Sherborn school system under his leadership. Over this past year, he's been focused on important initiatives that will have a lasting impact on our students and community as a whole. I believe his open communication regarding the start time task force was a big step in gaining the trust of the Dover-Sherborn community, ensuring that we're making the right decision for our students. His leadership during the COVID-19 crisis has been incredible, but to be fair, and I'm sure he'd be the first to agree, he hasn't done it all alone. Dr. Keogh, the administration, teachers, the students, parents have had to pivot quickly to learning remotely during this unprecedented time. Although not everything's going as smoothly as some of us would like, I believe the entire Dover-Sherborn staff deserves our thanks and gratitude for the Herculean effort it has taken to continue to educate remotely. Lastly, I'm pleased we're able to continue having Dr. Keogh guide our school system for another school year and look forward to working collaboratively with him on continuing to improve our excellent school district. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Nancy, do you have anything you'd like to read into the record? Okay, thank you. And Megan, do you have anything you'd like to read?
Yes, I do. I would like to thank Dr. Keogh for his commitment and work to continually improve the learning experience at Dover-Sherborn, both academically and social-emotionally. Most recently, the administration and faculty have done an amazing job of transitioning to remote learning under his leadership. While the remote experience is by no means a replacement for the classroom experience, the administration and teachers have put practices in place that make this a very meaningful experience for our students. Dr. Keogh's dedication to the students and faculty shows through his work every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. And since my school committee member summed it up so well, I think I'm good. So I'm going to turn it over now to Henry.
Great, thanks, Angie. Brooke, I'm going to start with you. Do you have anything you'd like to read into record?
I do. Dr. Keogh's thoughtful, student-centered leadership this past year has continued to advance Dover-Sherborn in the areas that were identified as important in the strategic plan. He links our initiatives to the district's mission and core values to move us forward in a planful, confident, and equitable manner. He also continues to put the social and emotional wellness of DS at the forefront of decision-making, which is even more critical in the unprecedented times that we are now facing. A lot has been accomplished this year, but I would highlight the management and communication of the second phase and the district start times change. This is an unprecedented initiative that will impact every single person within our schools. That the amount of thinking and work that has been required has been significant is an understatement. As anticipated, some aspects of this are not universally supported, and Dr. Keogh has been able to listen, address concerns, and problem solve where it is feasible. Thank you for your leadership and the many hours and long days required this year. We know there is more hard work to come. Please keep your mental and physical health at the forefront as we move forward. Apply your oxygen mask first so that you can continue to lead most effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. Mark, do you have something you'd like to read into record?
Sure, thank you. I appreciate that Dr. Keogh has led the Dover-Sherborn Regional District through some challenging undertakings in effort to support all students in the Dover-Sherborn school system. From a multi-year investment in changing school start times to an urgent and unified response to remote learning, the district has relied on his leadership and willingness to both challenge and support the progress being made. Regardless of the situation, Dr. Keough has demonstrated the wisdom to listen to multiple viewpoints. He has asked clarifying questions and clarified his own thinking as needed. He involves others in decision-making, and he develops solutions while keeping all stakeholders in mind. I appreciate Dr. Keough's honest reflections on the extent of progress made towards goals that he has set this year. The qualities articulated in the portrait of a Dover-Sherborn graduate and the revisions possible with a refined educator evaluation tool can help ensure that all DS students are exposed to authentic learning experiences and assessments as expressed in his student learning goals. As a parent of 3 Dover-Sherborn students, an educator in neighboring Needham, and a school committee member for Dover, I've enjoyed working with Dr. Keough and witnessing his leadership as it shapes and drives the wonderful work that we continue to commit to in Dover and Sherborn.
Thank you, Mark. Leslie, do you have something you'd like to read?
Yes, I apologize if you can't hear me. My connection is very spotty. Good evening. I'd like to start by saying thank you. Thank you for your dedication to our district and our children. You have a big job and even bigger goals. Throughout my first year on the committee, I've had the opportunity to witness firsthand your diligent work towards your goals. You showed dedication and commitment to our schools and community. The bulk of my commentary this evening will be on your goals and accomplishments for district improvement. As you know, it's the community of Dover-Sherborn that stands behind our schools. The community deserves clear and effective communication. Side by side with the Communications Task Force, I would like to see more opportunities for the community discussion in various types of forums. It is vital for the schools to be forthcoming about the district's goals and methods in which we aim to achieve those goals. I applaud you for directing and overseeing the amazing work that has been done on the student services model. You are setting a standard across the district that is applaudable. You have helped guide our faculty, staff, and educators in the enhancement of programs that support the social and emotional needs of our children, and I look forward to continued work on that front. I would also like to acknowledge the incredible work of the Assistant Superintendent. Together, you have accomplished many things. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I too will have something to say. Wow, what a year. We started the school year managing through EEE and are ending the year with remote learning while managing through COVID-19. In between, Dr. Keough and his team continued to work on our school start time plan and transition, portrait of a graduate, delivering a fair and effective budget, worked with the negotiation team to complete a 3-year educator agreement, and supported our administrators, leadership team, staff, and teachers throughout the year. Once again, thank you. Over the last year, when I think about everything I just mentioned, I keep coming back to leadership, specifically your leadership. There typically are 2 types of situational leaders, one who leads during the good times or one who has to lead during the challenging times. The good times leader can take time for groupthink and consensus building. The tough time leader needs to have direction, conviction, and confidence. All are important skills, and we've been fortunate to have a leader who has been able to lead us through, to lead our wonderful district during our smooth and also our most challenging times this year. As I think about next year, I look forward to seeing you implement our school start time change and to continue to innovate and challenge everyone within a district, including, but not limited to, students, educators, staff, school committees, and parents. Thank you. That's it, Angie, for us, because Rachel is not able to attend.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much, Henry. And thank you all for your thoughtful completion of the evaluations and for your comments. Anne, do you need anything else? Now we have to vote, correct?
Right, yeah.
Can I say one thing, Angie?
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Keough.
I want to thank all of you for, your support throughout this year. I couldn't possibly, I don't know who said it, maybe Mike, I'm sorry, I just can't remember who said it, but it is absolutely true that we can only do so much by ourselves, but with a team, we can get it done. And I have a very good team in these 3 school committees and in my central office leadership group, as well as in the district. So I want to thank you all for your comments.
Can I just make clear, so what we're voting on is not what everybody said. That's up to you as individuals, and that will be submitted as such. what we're voting on is the report that everybody contributed to, the ratings, and then the 2 paragraphs that I read that was a very basic summary of basically of the process and a little bit of the overview of the ratings. Okay, thanks.
Do you want to, we do it by each committee, correct? So do you want to start with the region, or do you want me to start with Sherborn? Doesn't matter.
Okay, region, take everybody off mute. We'll go through. Do I hear a motion to approve the summative evaluation report for Dr. Andrew Keogh for the 1920 school year?
So Maggie Sharon, so moved.
Do I hear a second?
Kate Potter, second.
Oh, go ahead, Kate.
Kate for the second. All right, thank you. Any discussion? All right, Michael Jaffe.
Michael Jaffe, yes.
Maggie.
Maggie Sharon, yes.
Kate.
Kate Potter, yes.
Lynn.
Lynn Collins, yes.
Judy.
Judy Miller, yes.
And Ann Hovey, yes. Thank you all.
Great. Andrew, I don't mind going. So Dover School Committee, please unmute. And do I have a motion as stated by Ann Hovey previously for the regional vote?
So moved.
Name, please.
Oh, Brooke Matarese, so moved. Sorry.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Mark Healy, second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. I'll roll call. Brooke.
Brooke Matarese, yes.
Mark.
Mark Healy, yes.
Leslie.
Leslie Leon, yes.
And Henry Spalding is a yes.
Okay, Sherborn School Committee, take yourself off of mute and remember to say your name if you're going to make the motion. Do I have a motion to approve the evaluation report for Dr. Andrew Keogh as stated? Do I have a motion?
Amanda Brown, so moved.
Thank you, Amanda. Do I have a second?
Nancy Cordell, second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to start going through and I'll call your name and remember say your name and what you vote. Amanda?
Amanda Brown, yes.
Mike?
Mike Fitzgerald, yes.
Nancy?
Nancy Cordell, yes.
And Megan?
Megan Page, yes.
And Angie Johnson, yes. So that concludes it, right, Ann, for this?
Can I just really quickly say
Yes.
Thank you so much to everyone for being flexible. This is clearly not the way that I've ever done an evaluation before. And hopefully we'll be able to look each other across the table and see each other in person, look each other's eyes when we do this next. And thank you, Dr. Keogh, also for being flexible and letting us do this in a little bit of a, I think it was Amanda who said, a topsy-turvy way.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated. I know that regardless of how we do it, it's always a lot of work to do the superintendent's evaluation. I remember it from my days on the school committee, and I just appreciate the time and energy you put into it and the thought you put into it. So thank you.
And before we end on this, I did want to thank Ann for pulling this together and kind of simplifying the process somewhat so that we could all do this remotely, because it added a degree of difficulty to be able to do it this way. And she made it simplistic and easy, and we got it all accomplished. So thank you, Ann, for the hard work. So the final part of our agenda is the approval of the minutes of April the 7th and April the 28th. If you read through them, from what I can recollect from April the 7th, it was fine, and the same with the 28th. As I said, the days are very long for me, and my memory is getting shorter the longer this goes on. So what my brain can remember, it looked correct. Did anyone have any corrections that they saw or any inaccuracies that they feel we need to correct? Okay. So that being said, we're going to vote on them separately, I think, or separately is the best way. So we'll do it by committee. I can start with Sherborn. Well, I'll ask first about the minutes of April 7th, and then we'll do the April the 20th.
No, you can do, we can do both of them as a consent. Yep.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So with that being said, do I have a motion to approve the minutes for consent for April 7th and April 28th for the joint school committee meeting? Sherborn. Nancy? So Nancy Cordell's first, moved, and second.
Megan Page, second.
Megan Page, second. Okay, if you're off mute, I'm going to call on each person. Amanda?
Amanda Brown, yes.
Mike?
Mike Fitzgerald, yes.
Nancy?
Nancy Cordell, yes.
Megan?
Megan Page, yes.
And Angie Johnson, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. For Dover, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for approval of the minutes from April 7th and April 28th as presented in our packet?
Mark Healy, so moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Brooke Matarese, second.
Leslie Leon.
Or-
Leslie, I think Brooke beat you by a hair. It's like Jeopardy. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call for vote. Brooke?
Brooke Matarese, yes.
Mark?
Mark Healy, yes.
Leslie?
Leslie Leon, yes.
Thank you. And Henry Spalding, yes.
All right, for the region, if you all take yourselves off mute, do I hear a motion to approve the consent agenda for minutes April 7th and April 28th?
Lynn Collins, so moved.
Thank you, Lynn. Do I hear a second?
Maggie Sharon, second.
Thank you, Maggie. All right, we'll go through Judy,
Yes. Judy Miller, yes.
Lynn,
Lynn Collins, yes.
Kate,
Kate Potter, yes.
Maggie,
Maggie Sharon, yes.
Michael,
Michael Jaffe, yes.
and Ann Hovey, yes.
Okay, so thank you all. So with that being said, and I think our business per the agenda is concluded, I shall move that we shall adjourn. Do I hear any nays to that, or is it all a yay?
Thank you.